My name's Alexandra, I'm 32 years old. And last year, my parents gave my $10 million inheritance to my sister. Then dragged me out of the house by my hair. That home wasn't just wood and bricks. It was my childhood, my sacrifice, my life. And when I realized what they'd done, I knew I had to fight back. Before I share how, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and subscribe for more real stories about family betrayal, revenge, and courage. The first sound I remember in life wasn't a lullaby or the hum of a television. It was the creak of floorboards under my tiny feet. Our house wasn't new, not by any stretch. It had chipped paint, windows that rattled in the wind, and pipes that moaned like an old man in pain. But to me that house was magic. I was born in the back bedroom, the smallest one with slanted ceilings. The wallpaper was peeling, decorated with little yellow flowers my mom said were vintage. I didn't know what vintage meant, but I knew those walls held the echoes of my laughter, the whispers of my secrets, and the tears I cried when I thought no one was listening. That room wasn't just a bedroom, it was my world. As I grew older, I began to see the cracks in our home the way you notice flaws in people you love. The porch sagged like it was tired of carrying our weight. The roof leaked every spring, dripping rainwater into a rusty bucket my dad never got around to replacing. Some nights, the smell of mildew hung in the air, reminding me that we lived in a house more stubborn than sturdy. Still, it was ours. I remember one winter when the heater broke. Mom wrapped me and my sister in blankets while Dad cursed under his breath, fumbling with tools in the basement. My fingers were so cold they turned red, but I didn't complain. I wanted to be strong for them, to show I was grateful even when life felt unfair. We roasted marshmallows over the gas stove that night. I can still see the firelight flickering in my sister's wide eyes. For a moment, the cold didn't matter. We were warm in the only way that truly counted. When I turned 12, I started helping with repairs. Dad said, "If you live here, you help here." He put a paintbrush in my hand and told me to keep the strokes even. My sister, of course, slipped away to play with her dolls. I stayed. I climbed ladders, painted fences, and scraped old wallpaper until my hands blistered. I was proud of every scar and stain. They were proof I was building something bigger than myself. Every Saturday, while other kids went to movies or the mall, I was sanding cabinets or pulling weeds from the backyard. Sometimes I hated it. I'd stare out the window, jealous of my friends laughing down the street. But then Dad would clap me on the back and say, "You've got grit, Alex. Not everyone has that." I'd smile through my exhaustion, believing him, believing that all the sweat and sacrifice meant I mattered to them. By high school, the house looked different because of me. Fresh paint, stronger steps, a kitchen with cabinets that didn't groan every time you opened them. I took pride when neighbors complimented it. I'd beam, pretending not to care, but inside I was glowing. It wasn't just a house, it was my fingerprint, my legacy. Still, cracks appeared, not just in the walls but in my family. I noticed how my sister, Emily, was treated differently. She was younger, prettier, the baby of the family. If she broke a plate, Mom laughed it off. If I broke one, I got the lecture about responsibility. Emily skipped chores and Dad shrugged. If I tried, he'd scold me for being lazy. I swallowed it, telling myself they loved us both the same. I wanted to believe that. One memory still stings like salt in a wound. It was the summer before my senior year. I spent weeks repainting the living room, climbing ladders until my arms ached. The day I finished, Emily waltzed in, wrinkled her nose and said, "I don't like this color. It's too dull." Mom nodded. Maybe Alex should have asked before painting. I felt my chest tighten. I had spent nights staying up late, inhaling paint fumes, sweating through old t-shirts, and it wasn't even worth a thank you. But I stayed quiet. I always stayed quiet. Because I thought if I kept working hard, if I kept giving, they'd see me. They'd love me the way I loved them. The house became my anchor. Even when my life outside felt shaky. When I had heartbreaks, I'd retreat to the backyard swing I built from an old tire, kicking my legs until the wind dried my tears. When school felt overwhelming, I'd collapse in the living room, staring at the ceiling I helped repaint, whispering to myself, "You built this. You belong here." It wasn't perfect. The neighbors had better houses, shinier cars, fancier clothes. But I told myself I didn't need those things. I had a family. I had roots. I had a home worth fighting for. Looking back now, maybe I was blind. Maybe I didn't want to see the favoritism that was obvious to everyone else. Maybe I thought my loyalty could balance the scales. But the truth is, I was the one patching cracks in more than just walls. I was patching cracks in the illusion that we were a family built on love. The deeper I invested in the house, the more I tied my identity to it. Every nail hammered, every brushstroke painted, every weed pulled. It was me saying I matter. I'm worthy. Don't forget me. And yet, as much as I gave, as much as I believed, the foundation of my family was already rotting. I just couldn't see it then. The cracks I had ignored for so long finally split open one evening in early spring. The air smelled faintly of rain. And the sky was that restless gray that made you wonder if the storm would ever arrive. I was sitting in the kitchen, sipping stale coffee, when Mom called out, "Alexandra, can you come to the living room? We need to talk." Her tone was clipped, almost businesslike. My stomach tightened. I wiped my palms on my jeans and walked in, expecting another family chore list, maybe an argument about bills. What I didn't expect was to see my parents sitting stiffly on the couch, my sister Emily standing beside them with her arms folded like she owned the place. Dad cleared his throat. "We've made some decisions about the house," he said. Something inside me froze. "What do you mean, decisions?" Mom exchanged a look with him before speaking. "The inheritance from your grandparents. We've decided it's best for Emily to handle it. The house will go to her." For a second, I thought I misheard. My ears rang as though I'd been dunked underwater. "What? No, you can't be serious." My voice cracked, trembling between disbelief and fury. Emily smirked. "It's not about fairness, Alex. It's about responsibility. I'm the one they can trust to take care of things." The words sliced through me. I had bled for this house, patched its wounds, poured my youth into it. And yet, here they were, handing it over like a prize to the child who had never lifted a hammer or wiped sweat from her brow on its behalf. I laughed bitterly, hoping it was a cruel joke. Responsibility? She doesn't even know how to change a light bulb. Dad's jaw tightened. "Watch your tone." My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat. "You're giving my inheritance to her? After everything I've done for this place? After all the years Enough." Mom's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. This decision is final." I staggered back, my knees weak. I could barely breathe. I wanted to scream, to shake them until they saw the truth, but all I managed was a whisper. "How could you do this to me?" Emily leaned closer, her perfume cloying, sweet in a way that made me nauseous. "Maybe if you weren't so bitter all the time, they'd trust you more. You should be grateful they let you live here as long as they did." Her words lit a fire in me. "Grateful?" I snapped. "I held this place together while you were busy chasing parties and selfies. You wouldn't know responsibility if it smacked you in the face." The room went silent for a beat too long, the kind of silence that feels heavy, suffocating. Then Dad stood up, his face red. "Get out, Alex. Right now." I blinked, stunned. "Out? You're throwing me out?" Mom rose too, her hands trembling but her voice firm. "You need to leave. You're not welcome here anymore." Before I could react, Dad reached forward, his fingers tangling painfully in my hair. He yanked me toward the door like I was some unruly child. I cried out, grabbing his wrist, but his grip only tightened. My scalp burned with every pull. My feet scrambled against the hardwood as I tried to keep my balance. "Stop," I gasped, tears stinging my eyes. "Please don't do this." But Emily only watched, arms crossed, lips curling into that smug grin I'll never forget. The front door swung open, and the cool air rushed in. Neighbors across the street glanced over from their porch, their faces frozen in awkward shock. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and vanish, but instead I was dragged across the threshold and shoved into the yard like yesterday's trash. The door slammed shut behind me. I stumbled to my knees, gravel biting into my skin. My hair hung in my face, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. For a moment, all I could do was sit there, staring at the house I had poured my soul into, the house that had once been my sanctuary. Now it was a fortress locking me out. The world felt muted, like someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. I could faintly hear laughter. Emily's voice, high and mocking, muffled through the door. I pressed my palms to the ground, grounding myself against the spinning in my head. It was over. Just like that. I stood shakily, brushing dirt from my jeans. My knees were bleeding, but the sting didn't compare to the hollowness spreading in my chest. I turned toward the street, not knowing where I'd go. My car was parked a block away, but I didn't have the strength to walk. As I stood there, Mrs. Johnson from next door called softly, "Alex, honey, are you all right?" Her voice was tentative, hesitant. She clutched her sweater tighter around her shoulders, glancing nervously at the house behind me. I forced a nod, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I'm fine." I lied. My voice didn't sound like mine, it was cracked, brittle. She frowned but didn't press. I could see the pity in her eyes, and it stung almost as much as the betrayal. I didn't want pity. I wanted justice. The clouds finally broke, and rain began to fall, cold droplets soaking into my hair, sliding down my cheeks until I couldn't tell where the tears ended and the rain began. I walked slowly down the street, each step heavier than the last. The weight of what just happened pressed on me like a boulder. I wasn't just losing money, or even the house itself. I was losing the belief that my parents saw me, that they valued me, that all those years of sweat and sacrifice meant something. I replayed every moment of the confrontation in my head, each word sharper than the last. Mom's finality, Dad's rough hands, Emily's smirk. How had it come to this? How had love twisted into cruelty so quickly? I wanted to scream into the rain, to collapse right there on the curb, but I forced myself to keep moving. I didn't know where I was headed, but I knew I couldn't stay in that street, drenched and broken. By the time I reached my car, I was shaking. I slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened. My reflection in the rearview mirror startled me. My eyes were red and swollen, my hair tangled, my face streaked with dirt and rain. I didn't look like myself. I looked like someone who had been stripped of everything. I sat there for what felt like hours, the storm raging around me, before finally turning the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered to life, and I pulled away from the only home I had ever known, the one that no longer wanted me. But as the house faded in the rear view, something hardened inside me. The betrayal cut deep, but it didn't kill me. Not yet. I wasn't sure how, but I knew this story wasn't finished. I wasn't sure how, but I knew this story wasn't finished. For a long moment, I just sat there, letting those words echo inside me. The tears had dried on my cheeks, leaving behind a salty tightness on my skin. My chest still ached, but something different began to rise, a small, shaky ember of determination. Lisa walked back into the room with a cup of tea. "You need to eat something," she said softly, setting it on the table. "I'll try," I whispered, though my stomach turned at the thought. She didn't push. She simply sat across from me, her hand resting close enough for me to reach if I wanted. I didn't, not yet, but her presence was enough to keep me steady. That night, I lay awake on her couch, staring at the ceiling. I kept thinking about everything I had lost, but mixed in with the pain was a single thought. I am still here. And if I was still here, maybe there was something left for me to build. The next morning, I pulled myself up earlier than I had in weeks. My body felt heavy, but I forced myself to move. I borrowed Lisa's shower, scrubbed my hair, and put on clean clothes. They didn't belong to me, just a spare set she had, but slipping into them felt like stepping into a new skin. Lisa noticed. She smiled over her coffee. "You look more like yourself today." I didn't feel like myself, not yet. But her words warmed me. By noon, I was walking into the small diner 2 blocks away. Lisa had mentioned they were always looking for extra hands, and though the thought of working in public made my chest tighten, I knew I couldn't sit still forever. The owner, a stout woman named Rita, eyed me from behind the counter. "You ever wait tables?" I shook my head. "No. But I can learn." She gave a grunt, half amusement, half challenge. "We'll see. Grab an apron." And just like that, I had a job. The first shift nearly broke me. The clatter of dishes, the rush of customers, the endless balancing act of trays and plates. I stumbled, spilled, and apologized so many times I thought Rita would throw me out. But instead she barked, "Keep moving, you'll toughen up." Her sharpness should have stung, but oddly enough it steadied me. I wasn't fragile here. I was just another worker, expected to keep going. By the end of the night, my feet throbbed, and my back ached. But when Rita pressed a few wrinkled bills into my hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, a spark of pride. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The days blurred into a routine. Morning tea with Lisa. Long shifts at the diner. Nights collapsing onto her couch. Each day, the hole inside me felt a little less deep. I wasn't healed, not even close, but I was climbing out inch by inch. One evening, as I was scrubbing tables, a familiar face appeared at the door. Aunt June. I hadn't seen her in years, not since a silly argument that had driven a wedge between us. She looked older, her hair whiter, but her eyes softened when she saw me. "I heard what happened," she said, her voice low. I froze, unsure whether to hug her or turn away. She didn't wait. She pulled me into her arms, and despite my resistance, I melted against her. For the first time since everything had collapsed, I felt the comfort of family again. We sat in a booth long after closing, sipping coffee. She told me about her quiet life on the edge of town, about her garden, about how she wished she had called me sooner. "You don't have to do this alone," she said, reaching across the table. "Come visit me sometime. Stay if you need to." Her offer cracked something open inside me. I wasn't ready to leave Lisa yet, but the idea that there was another safe place waiting eased the weight on my chest. Weeks passed, and slowly, I found my rhythm. I saved every spare dollar, tucking the crumpled bills into an old envelope I kept hidden in my bag. At night, I counted them like a child hoarding treasures. Each dollar meant I was one step closer to standing on my own again. One late afternoon, I walked past a for rent sign in front of a small brick building. My heart skipped. It wasn't much, just a narrow studio with peeling wallpaper and a single window. But when the landlord unlocked the door and I stepped inside, I felt something stir. The place smelled faintly of dust, but sunlight streamed across the wooden floor. It wasn't the house I had lost, not even close, but it was space that could be mine. "How much?" I asked, my voice trembling. When he told me, I swallowed hard. It would take nearly everything I had saved. But I nodded. "I'll take it." Moving in was both exhilarating and terrifying. Lisa hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm proud of you." I didn't have much to carry, just a bag of clothes, a second-hand blanket, and a chipped mug she insisted I take. But stepping into that tiny studio felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The first night, I sat on the floor, eating a sandwich wrapped in foil. The room was silent, almost too silent, but I didn't feel lost. I felt grounded. I whispered aloud, "This is mine," testing the sound of the words. It wasn't just four walls. It was proof that I could fall, break, and still begin again. Of course, life didn't suddenly become easy. The diner was still exhausting. Some nights I collapsed on my thin mattress and cried from the ache in my bones. The rent pinched every penny, and sometimes I wondered if I had made a mistake. But then small moments reminded me why I kept going. A customer leaving me a generous tip with a scribbled note. "Keep smiling." Rita, slapping me on the shoulder with a gruff, "Not bad, kid." Lisa showing up with a bag of groceries, insisting, "Don't argue, just take it." Or Aunt June arriving one Saturday with a pot of soup, filling my little studio with the smell of home. Each moment stitched a little more strength into me. One evening, as I closed up the diner, Mark, the cook who had mostly kept to himself, stopped me at the door. "You're tougher than you look," he said, his eyes kind. I laughed, surprised. "I don't feel tough." "Doesn't matter how you feel," he shrugged. "What matters is you show up." His words lingered with me all night. I show up. It sounded simple, but it carried a truth I hadn't seen before. I didn't have to be perfect, or unbroken, or fearless. I just had to keep showing up, one day at a time. And for the first time, I believed I could. That night, lying on my mattress, I traced the cracks in the ceiling and let myself imagine the future. Not in big, impossible pictures, but in small, steady steps. Tomorrow, I would go to work. Next week, I'd save a little more. Maybe in time, I could buy a second-hand table, maybe a chair, maybe even paint the walls. I wasn't dreaming of castles or mansions anymore. I was dreaming of something quieter, steadier, more lasting. And as I drifted off to sleep, a gentle peace settled over me. I was still climbing, still bruised, still aching, but I was no longer on the ground. I was standing. The morning light spilled across the cracks in the ceiling, soft and golden. I blinked awake slowly, the thin mattress beneath me creaking as I shifted. For the first time in months, my body didn't ache with dread. The silence of my little studio wasn't heavy anymore. It was a blank page, waiting for me to write something new. I lay there for a while, staring at the patch of sunlight on the floor, and a single thought came. What's next? It was a question that used to terrify me. But now, it stirred something different. Possibility. That afternoon at the diner, as I carried plates back and forth, an idea began to form. Watching Rita run the place with quick movements and sharp commands, I realized something. She had built this life with her own hands. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. During a lull between customers, I leaned against the counter and asked, Rita, how did you start all this? She gave me a side eye, still wiping glasses with a rag. This place? Took every cent I had, plus a loan I barely got approved for. Spent years paying it off. Why? I hesitated, then shrugged. Just wondering. I'd like to build something of my own someday. Her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Then start small. Don't wait for perfect. Perfect never comes. Her words stayed with me long after my shift ended. Start small. That night, sitting on the floor of my studio with a notepad balanced on my knees, I made my first list. It wasn't neat, just scribbles of half-thoughts and messy numbers, but it was mine. Save $2,000. Learn a new skill. Explore side income. Build connections. Don't give up. I underlined the last one twice. The saving part was the hardest. Every paycheck barely stretched far enough to cover rent, food, and bus fare. But I started cutting corners. I gave up little luxuries. No more takeout sandwiches during breaks. No more extra cups of coffee I didn't need. Instead, I packed leftovers even if it was just bread and soup. Lisa noticed. One evening, when she stopped by with a bag of groceries, she asked, Why are you living like you're starving when you've got a job now? I smiled faintly. Because I want more than just surviving. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Then let me help. I'll keep bringing these until you're steady. Her kindness brought tears to my eyes, but I didn't refuse this time. Accepting help wasn't weakness, it was part of the plan. Step 2: learn a new skill. That one scared me. I hadn't studied in years. But one evening while clearing tables, I overheard two customers chatting about free computer classes at the library. I almost dismissed it. I wasn't the type for computers. But the thought kept poking at me. What if this was the start small Rita had talked about? The next week, I walked into the library, palms sweating. The room smelled of old books and freshly brewed coffee from a nearby kiosk. At the far end, a volunteer instructor was setting up laptops. First time? He asked kindly as I hovered near the doorway. I nodded. I don't even know where to start. Good, he said with a grin. That's the best place to begin. I laughed nervously, but his warmth settled me. That night I learned how to send emails, type faster, and search for information. It was small, almost trivial, but I left with my chest lifted. I had learned something new. Weeks passed and little by little, my plan felt less like scribbles and more like a path. One evening, Aunt June visited again, carrying a basket of fresh vegetables from her garden. We sat at my tiny fold-out table, the first piece of furniture I'd managed to buy secondhand, and she listened as I explained my plan. You've always been resourceful, she said, slicing into a tomato. I remember when you were a girl, selling lemonade in the summer. You'd count every coin like it was treasure. I chuckled at the memory. Feels like I'm back there again. Not back, she corrected gently. Forward. You're planting seeds. That's how gardens grow. Her words lingered. Planting seeds. That was exactly how it felt. The third step, exploring side income, came almost by accident. One morning at the diner, a regular customer admired the way I arranged flowers in a chipped vase near the counter. "You've got an eye," she said. "Do you do this often?" I laughed. "Just something I like to play around with." "Well, you should think about selling arrangements. My niece is getting married next spring, and she's looking for someone local and affordable." The idea startled me. Flowers? I'd never thought of it as more than a small joy. But that night, I bought a cheap bunch from the corner store and practiced. Arranging them calmed me, like piecing beauty out of chaos. The next week, I tried selling a small bouquet at the diner for a few extra dollars. To my surprise, someone bought it. Then another. Slowly, what had been a pastime became a small stream of income. Nothing huge, but enough to add to the envelope in my drawer. Of course, not everything went smoothly. Some days, exhaustion knocked me flat. There were weeks when my savings dipped because an unexpected bill came up. There were nights when doubt whispered, "What if this is all pointless? What if I fail again?" One evening, after a particularly hard shift where a rude customer had left me near tears, I sat in my studio, staring at my list. My hand trembled as I picked up the pen, ready to cross the whole thing out. But then I remembered Mark's words. "What matters is you show up." So instead of crossing it out, I added a new line. "Keep showing up." The fourth step, building connections, took courage. I forced myself to talk more at the diner, not just to customers but to coworkers too. Mark started teaching me little tricks in the kitchen. How to chop faster, how to season simply but well. "You've got patience," he said one night. "That matters more than skill sometimes." Rita even began trusting me with small responsibilities, like handling orders when she stepped out. She never praised me directly, but the fact that she relied on me spoke volumes. Outside of work, I began talking to people in my computer class, even attending a free workshop on small businesses. I sat there, heart racing, listening to stories of people who had started with nothing and built something meaningful. Their struggles felt familiar, but their victories gave me hope. Then came the fifth step, don't give up. It sounded simple, but it was the hardest of all. There were days I wanted to quit, when the climb felt endless. But then something small, a kind word, a little success, a moment of laughter, would remind me why I was pushing forward. One late night, after balancing my envelope of savings, I realized I had reached $1,000. Halfway to my goal. I sat on the floor, the bills spread out around me like fragile wings, and I cried. Not from sorrow this time, but from pride. I was doing it. I was shaping a future with my own hands. The plan wasn't perfect. It shifted, grew, and stumbled along with me. But it was real. It gave me direction when I felt lost, strength when I felt weak, and hope when I wanted to give up. And as I lay in bed one quiet night, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, I whispered to myself, I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm building. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. The night I counted that envelope and saw the bills stacked higher than ever before, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just money anymore. It was proof. Proof that I had rebuilt myself from the ashes, piece by piece. Proof that I wasn't the broken girl they had left behind on the porch. But as much as I cherished what I was building, I couldn't shake the unfinished business gnawing at me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' faces, cold, dismissive, blind to the hurt they had carved into me. And I saw my sister's smirk, the way she'd stood behind them while they tore my future out of my hands. They had taken everything that should have been mine. And no matter how far I had come, I knew deep down, I couldn't truly move forward until I reclaimed it. The first step was information. I didn't storm over to their house or confront them head-on. I'd learned enough about control to know better. Instead, I began quietly asking questions. At the diner, a customer who worked in real estate mentioned the booming market. I leaned in casually. So, how does it work if someone inherits property? Like if they want to sell it? He explained the basics: deeds, probate, taxes. I scribbled mental notes. Later, in the library, I pored over free legal guides, my pen racing across my notebook. It felt strange, studying the very system that had been used against me. But knowledge was power, and I was collecting it piece by piece. The next piece came from Aunt June. One Saturday, as we sat in her garden sipping sweet tea, I asked carefully, "Do you know what happened with Dad's old accounts?" Or the land near the lake? Her brow furrowed. I know your parents put everything in your sister's name when your father passed. Said it was simpler that way. But Alexandra, I don't think they filed everything properly. They rushed it. My pulse quickened. You mean there could be a mistake? She hesitated, then nodded. It's possible. Sometimes in their eagerness to push you out, people don't cover all their bases. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling again. But this time it wasn't with fear. It was with calculation. If there was even one loose thread, I was going to pull it. I started with the courthouse. The building smelled of dust and old paper, the kind of place where time felt slower. I requested public records. Nervous my voice might shake, but the clerk handed over folders without a second glance. Sitting at a table by the window, I flipped through pages of deeds, wills, and signatures. My eyes burned from scanning, but then there it was. A line where my father's estate had been transferred. The signature looked rushed, sloppy, and the notary's stamp, incomplete. My hands trembled as I traced the ink. Could something this small really matter? I didn't know for sure, but it was enough to keep me digging. Weeks passed like this. By day, I worked the diner, arranged flowers, attended my classes. By night, I became my own investigator. Each new discovery fueled me, like finding breadcrumbs leading back to what had been stolen. One evening, I called Lisa, excitement bubbling. You won't believe what I found. Dad's will, it named me too. Not just her. They ignored it. She gasped. Alexandra, that's huge. You need a lawyer. I laughed bitterly. And pay them with what? My flower money. But even as I joked, I knew she was right. If I wanted this done properly, I couldn't do it alone. So I saved harder. Every extra bouquet I sold, every tip I tucked away, it all went toward one goal. After months, I finally had enough for a consultation. The attorney's office was modest, not like the grand firms I had imagined. That eased my nerves. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a kinder smile listened carefully as I poured out my story, sliding papers across her desk. When I finished, she leaned back, tapping her pen. You have a case. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick. But if you're ready to fight, we can move forward. A shiver ran through me. For the first time, the possibility wasn't just in my head, it was real. The process was grueling. Letters sent, filings made, deadlines looming. My parents didn't respond at first. Then came the fury. One evening, my phone lit up with my mother's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was sharp, trembling with rage. How dare you drag this through the courts? Haven't you humiliated us enough? I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice steady. You humiliated me when you threw me out. This isn't about pride. It's about what's mine. She scoffed, then hissed, ungrateful girl. You'll regret this. But when the call ended, I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. I felt steel in my spine. For once, they were the ones unsettled. Months blurred into hearings and paperwork. My sister glared across the courtroom like a storm cloud ready to burst. She didn't speak to me directly, but her smugness was gone. That alone was worth every sleepless night. During breaks, I'd sit outside on the courthouse steps watching people pass. Strangers rushing to their lives, unaware of mine unraveling and reweaving right there. It made me realize how ordinary my struggle was, yet how extraordinary it felt to finally stand up. Then came the day of decision. The judge's voice was calm, measured, as she read through the findings. My heart pounded so loud I barely heard the words, until one phrase cut through. And therefore, the court recognizes Alexandra's rightful share. The rest blurred. All I knew was that the weight pressing on my chest lifted, replaced by a rush of breathless relief. I had done it. Afterward, standing outside with my lawyer, I felt the cool breeze brush against my face. The world looked sharper, brighter, as though I had been living behind fogged glass until now. You fought hard, my lawyer said. Be proud of that. Pride. It was such a foreign word, but in that moment, I let it sink in. That night, I spread the court documents on my little table. The same table Aunt June had sat at with her tomatoes. The same table where Lisa had shared laughter and hope. Now it held proof that I had reclaimed what was mine. Not just money, Not just property but dignity. I whispered to myself. They tried to erase me, but I wrote myself back in. I didn't call my parents. I didn't gloat to my sister. Silence was louder than any confrontation. My victory wasn't about rubbing it in their faces. It was about knowing I had survived, fought, and won. Instead, I called Lisa. When she picked up, I said simply, "It's done. I got it back." Her cheer echoed through the line. "Alexandra, I knew you would. I'm so proud of you." And this time, I believed her. As I folded the papers and tucked them into a folder, I realized something. Reclaiming what was mine wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. A chance to finally shape a life not from what they handed me, but from what I had fought for. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free.